Hello, Robo Buddies, it's SilentSigns from I Dream of Indie, and today we are taking a look at puzzle platformer Time Loader. In Time Loader, you predictably play as a tiny robot that travels in time. This particular robot just so happens to be owned by a young man who has a tragic accident in his youth, and that kind of sets the trajectory for the rest of his life. Fortunately, he also just so happens to be somewhat of a scientific genius, so he figures out a way to send his robot friend back in time in order to undo what's been done. I think you and I have both seen too many movies to not know how this is going to turn out, right? Rather predictable, but definitely nostalgic storyline aside, let's talk about how Time Loader plays. Right off the bat, you get a little basic built-in tutorial on how the robot controls. You can move him left and right, he can jump, he can grab objects, and he can throw objects. You do later on get some other abilities, and we'll get into that a little bit later, but those are pretty much your bread and butter when it comes to playing Time Loader. Most of what you're going to be doing in Time Loader is navigating this robot through various rooms in a house, which sounds rather dull, but they found a way to make that engaging, at least for the most part. It definitely has a huge nostalgia factor to it, especially when you're traveling into the past, and you can find little bits and pieces of nostalgia scattered about all of the bedrooms and the basements. And yes, most of what you're going to be doing is navigating from point A to point B and finding objects along the way, but they did find a way to make that feel fun. Even though this robot isn't necessarily a toy, I don't know why, but I kept being reminded of Toy Story and even some of the Toy Story games while playing this, and I think it's because the robot has an internal voice of its own, and it definitely has a personality, and just the miniature size of it navigating through these household landscapes. It just has a certain level of whimsy to it, which I really appreciated. There are also collectibles in the form of little objects and letters and voice recordings that you can encounter in your explorations, and it does appear that there are multiple endings to be found here. I just so happen to get a bad ending, and I guess that alludes to the fact that there would be a good ending, right? I definitely didn't find the puzzle difficulty to be too high. In fact, most of it I found very intuitive. Exploring the rooms, you can kind of naturally come up with the solution to almost anything, unless there is some sort of a glitch, which did happen to me a few times. Something that I needed to interact with just simply wasn't there. But from what I understand, there are going to be patches to this game, so hopefully that will be addressed by the time that you're playing it. And if you do happen to run into some sort of a glitch or a bug, it is pretty easy to simply go into your menu and restart from the last checkpoint, and you tend to not lose a whole lot of progress that way, which is a lifesaver. Minor glitches and one game crash aside, I was willing to forgive all that and was for the most part pretty strong positive about Time Loader. That is until they introduced the bane of my existence, the grappling hook. Which, look, don't get me wrong, I'm happy that they were trying to implement different types of tools and expanding upon the basic gameplay by introducing something later in game, but this did not work well. My game glitched out even more once it was introduced, and it was just quite frankly not as fun to play or even solve the puzzles with. And I do still think this is a fun puzzle platformer. I'm just not quite as positive on it as I was before they introduced that mechanic. Time Loader does have a great visual style, though. I love how they implemented these domestic spaces in such a unique way. Again, the perspective of this tiny robot navigating through a probably normal-sized house and just using and utilizing every inch of space and pipes and floorboards that could possibly be used. Bravo, I thought it was genius and very creative. They also did a great job of using light and shadow to their advantage. For example, an area that could not yet be explored would be shrouded in darkness until you figured out a way to turn a light on, and then you can navigate through that section. It didn't feel unnatural in any way, and it worked really cohesively with the puzzle solving. It also has a fantastic use of sound design, and the soundtrack is just absolutely killer. I'm a huge fan of retro synth and things of that nature, so they really stuck their hooks in me with those retro sounds and the nostalgia vibes they had going on here in general. There is also voice acting here. The robot has a little voice of his own, and you get to hear various messages and letters from different characters within this world. It's a nice little touch that kind of helps humanize the story, and even though it is completely fictional and far-fetched, it kind of brings it closer closer to home a little bit. All in all, it took me about 5 hours to complete one run through with finding a fair amount of collectibles in this game. I'm sure there's plenty of replay value if you want to go in and collect everything and get the different endings. I do feel like Time Loader actually kind of went on a little bit too long, and I know that's a weird thing to complain about, but you end up retreading through a lot of the same areas by the end of the game, which is not necessarily something I always mind, but it did just feel a little bit repetitive by the end, especially when you had to then use the grappling hook. That thing made me unreasonably angry. I can't even express to you, oh my god. On the bright side, completing the game does unlock a chapter selection screen where you can choose between 3 acts, so if you'd like to just go in and explore and find things that you may have missed the first time, you don't have to go through the whole game again if you don't want to. As a whole package, I do think Time Loader is worth your time. I can't believe I just said that, but I do mean it. It was a lot of fun for a puzzle platformer. It does need a little bit of oil in its robot joints here and there, but I think there is something here. So will you be doing the time warp? Let me know in the comments down below. Before I go, I just want to thank our indie warriors Mitchell Hall, Bunny Kevelo, Bill T, Christian Cruz, Chris Jackson, Nathan Moore, Peach, Adriana Amato, CJR, PSC, C Coil, Skepticism, Jen Rose, Jesse, CPM, Julian Colbus, JRS8, Raylan, and Marky Mint. Thank you all so much for your support. Thank you for watching this video. If you haven't already, don't forget you can subscribe down below so you don't miss any reviews or previews, and check out the description box if you'd like to see how to become an indie warrior yourself. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.